Hello and welcome to this week of our class. This week we are going to be talking about news of today. We looked at live television and live TV programming last week. Well, this week we are going to be focusing on a form of live television, of course, which is news and broadcast news. Now, broadcast news has existed since the first beginning of media, realistically, and that would be in the form of print journalism, and then radio, and then ultimately television. Once the advent of television, which we've learned about this semester, we were able to go ahead and start broadcasting news. Now, the thing that we're talking on and focusing on is the concept of news integrity. Now, I want to tell you personal experience of my life. Now, I actually worked in news industry for about 4 years. It's been close to about 15 years now. I actually worked at a local news broadcast. I worked in the production house. I was considered a production assistant. A production assistant is someone who works on the news, but when you're a production assistant at a news station, that means you do a lot of things. We were editing, we were running cameras, we were running teleprompter, and I actually was able to move my position, and I worked in the actual production room for the live news broadcast of doing Chiron, which was graphics that came on screen. When it said someone's names, the Chiron would come up and it would say Professor Tim Allen, would be under my name, and that I would build those and I would call them to be turned on by the technical director, who is the person that pushed the buttons that moved, changed the shots, and all of that fun stuff on live news broadcast. Live news broadcast is a really exciting career, except the modern era of news has made it a harder job to get. Now, we'll talk about that in just a bit, but I did want to say that working in news gave me a perspective of news that I didn't have. First and foremost, when I watch local news, and what local news is would be your local affiliated news that is put out there for you specifically in an area where you live. So what does that mean? So if we think about how the main television broadcast channels, like our NBCs, our Foxes, our ABCs, all of them have a local news channel, and that is something that airs usually in the mornings and usually at 5 p.m. and 11. Sometimes if it's Fox, it's 10 because they don't have 11 p.m. programming, but every single channel has their own news, and all of those news channels are local. They report on local news, what's happening in their area. So, for example, the news station that I worked at was Salinas. So locally, our Salinas news station was an NBC affiliate, and they also had KION. So the station I worked at was KSBW, which was the NBC affiliate. So that means that local news programming, especially at KSBW that I worked at, I was able to get some perspective on how to produce news, and also like the biases that go into producing news. Of course, your local news stations are all operated by the affiliate, who is made up of major areas. So, for example, in Gilroy, we don't have a local news channel, but we are represented by San Jose. KNTV is the local news that does cover the Bay Area. And then there is even one that, if you want to watch, that goes up to San Francisco, would cover the whole Bay Area as well. It's a much bigger market. But I used to work for KSBW, which was in Salinas, California, which covered the Monterey Bay area, which is a different division and a much, much smaller market. And by market, it really refers to the amount of people that were there. So working at KSBW for 4.5 years, the insight that I got was there's way more mistakes that are made on the news that like people don't even notice. When I watch a news broadcast, I realize, oh, they messed up a font or they showed the wrong video, or if the reporter says something wrong, there's multiple reasons why things would be going wrong. But what is good about local news and why I suggest that like we should all at least check in with our local news coverage is local news gives us a hyperfixed um, coverage of news in our area. And what does that mean? That means if something happens in Gilroy, it's going to be covered on these news stations and it might not be as impressive to get to national news. And that's what a lot of news is now is national coverage, which when you go to your cable news channel or online, you're going to check out maybe NBC or not NBC, sorry, CNN, Fox News, or MSNBC are probably the biggest notable ones. There's Newsmax, there's other news outlets, and of course, YouTube and podcasts are ways that people get their news, but aren't necessarily news per se. We all gather our information about the world through our social media channels and our content devices on YouTube and television, but our local news really is limited to your local cable provider. If you don't have cable, you can definitely find your local news online. They usually have YouTube channels or social medias where you can watch clips locally, but realistically, it's a service that was designed to provide the news to people of an area of a particular area. And as the the media climate has changed to where we now are able to consume news from everywhere, we the need for local news is actually the highest it ever is, but the power that they have and the advertising dollars that they're able to gain really is at all-time low. So local news is severely understaffed. And as a production assistant, 15 years ago, I was underpaid. So I can only imagine what it's like then. Um, I think the major problem with news these days is it's changed so much in the last 20, 30, 40 years that it's hard for us, the American people, to know what to watch, who to trust, and where we get our news from. We have so much opportunities to gather content and to gather the information that is available to us that we need to use our brains and basically choose who we're going to trust. Now, I'm going to talk about how I consume the news, but realistically, you know, the advent of the internet, the stopping of cable news, all affected. Yeah, and because of the multiple opportunities to get, to open up our phone and look to see what somebody thinks of a particular action or something that's happening in the news, we have to parse our information based off of that. So, um, uh, you know, the Americans' view of the news and what's trustworthy has changed so much. As late as 1993, nearly 80% of Americans had complete trust in the news. But today, 73% of adults in America have become skeptical, and even less now. And it's realistically the fault of the advent of cable news, which took over the market share from local news and the internet. Of course, we've talked about our socials and seeing things. Past generations got their news from newspapers and network news. It looks similar, but there was something that was called journalistic integrity. And journalist integrity was a series of standards that were put on how news was gathered, sourced, and told to our told to the public. So the reason people trusted the news was because these steps that were taken to gather the news and report it accurately and unbiasedly, um, people believed in the news. Now, one of the biggest advents was cable news, which was news. Like I said, local news is on at 5 and 11 and also in the morning. So, what does that mean? That means that they were only programming for 2, 3 hours a day for programming. Well, cable news became the advent of this is a news channel that's on 24/7. So what do they have to do? They can't repeat the same 3 hours. They have to constantly be updating, getting people to stick around so that they can run their advertisements. Now, local news has advertisements as well. So you always have to see uh, what is affecting your news. And that's always going to be money because we live in a capitalist society, and the way our content is doled out, technically it's free unless you're paying for cable, and then it's a premium channel. But broadcast news, which is broadcast over the airways, you should be able to get it for free if you have an antenna. Um, or a box to get the HD channels now, but realistically, they still need advertising dollars because they have audiences who are watching, and that's what ratings are. Um, so there's a scoop. A scoop in news is when you find out something and you have it first and you want to put it out there. Well, the scoop becomes more and more important because whoever gets the information out there first gets more of the attention and gets more of the dollar. So it's become a thing. 24-hour news like CNN, MSNBC, or Fox News need those viewers because that's how they get paid. The whole organization is run off of advertising, and the way that advertising works is based off of your ratings. So the more people you have, the more you can charge for your ads, and the more ads you play, or the more money you get. So it's interesting too because the advent of cable news and that it became successful, they realized like, hey, let's not just we want an audience, and we're not going to do unbiased news. We're actually going to do biases in our news programming. What does that mean? That means that when a channel like MSNBC or Fox News, they realized, hey, we want our audience to stick here and we want like-minded individuals to watch our content. So you may know that Fox News presents the news more geared towards conservatives, and MSNBC presents the news more geared towards progressives. And Fox News tries to be kind of in that middle and present both sides of the information. But of course, everything is presented by the dollar, and that really influences how we gather news. I have 3 different clips here, and why don't we take a look? We're going to watch how the government shutdown that's happened this year was covered by MSNBC, Fox News, and CNN. So let's take a look, and we'll discuss after I show you these clips. So let's start with Fox News. I'm going to share my screen, share the sound, and here we go.
Comes at a significant political cost to Democrats. There is a growing call for new leadership after progressives slammed more centrist leaders for giving in to Republicans. Our senior national correspondent, Aisha Husney, is on Capitol Hill tonight. Hello, Aisha.
John, good evening to you. As you know, the government is finally reopened, but it's only funded through January 30th, which means that Congress really only has less than 80 days to figure out something on health care, or else we could be back facing another shutdown showdown. Tonight, Republicans on Capitol Hill are echoing President Trump's claim that the left extorted the country.
Hopefully Democrats learn their lesson that when they hurt the American people, Republicans will stand up to their desire to do that.
While Democrats warn the fight for affordable health care is far from over.
The Republicans have adopted a my way or the highway approach. And unless they change course, we're going to have challenges governmentally for the balance of the first 2 years of Donald Trump's time in office.
But the Democrats' path forward is in flux. Some say the shutdown was worth it because now the country and the president are talking about health care.
Was it worth it? You have to start the process by trying. You have to allow an opportunity to talk.
Even if Republicans are drawing red lines.
The Republicans would demand a lot of reforms before anything like that was ever possible.
But others on the left feel like they got nowhere. Today, Democrat Senator Chris Murphy called for new leadership without naming Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. The 74-year-old receiving blame for not stopping his members from helping Republicans reopen the government without getting a guaranteed extension of the Affordable Care Act tax credits.
I don't think that that's the way that you save a democracy. And yes, that means we need more effective leadership.
Senator Cory Booker said as much last night, writing, "The Democratic Party needs change. It's time for a new generation of leaders to stand up to Trump." And John, remember, part of this whole deal is to give Senate Democrats a vote on those tax credits sometime in December. The centrists over there are hoping that they have bought themselves a couple of weeks here before that vote to get with the conservatives and maybe come to a bipartisan agreement, something that might have a shot in the House. We'll see if their party will allow them to do that. John?
All right, we'll see if that goes forward. Meantime, Aisha, a Democrat who voted every time to reopen the government from day one, John Fetterman, is in the hospital. What do we know about that?
He is. He actually was taking a morning walk when he fell, and when he fell, he actually hit his face on the ground and suffered some minor injuries. He was taken to the hospital where doctors found that he had a ventricular fibrillation flare-up. I hope I said that right. He is doing well, though. He says, if you thought my face looked bad before, wait until you see it now. So he's in a humorous spirit. He's still at the hospital right now for routine observation. John?
Good humor there, but ventricular fibrillation is certainly nothing to fool with. Aisha, thank you. Appreciate it.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News.
Okay. So we took a look at that Fox News clip. It was actually kind of biased. They presented or tried to be unbiased as possible, but they presented both Democrats and Republicans. If we watch that clip, we just know that, like, oh, okay, they were kind of trying to show both sides. They talked positively about the president, who, of course, this is a conservative administration. So Fox News would be the or the cable news programming that would like most of the things that happens with the administration right now. And in fact, Donald Trump is often calls in and interrupts some of the more programming that like is open more to interpretation and everything. Let's take a look at MSNBC and how they cover this and on one of their news programs. This is Morning Joe, their morning talk show.
Other than the New England Patriots possibly becoming the best, if not one of the best teams in the NFL. I mean, they're looking good. The Pats are back. But also, and this is just Democrats, I get it. They have the best week that they've had in a year and a half. And then fear and loathing and the wringing of hands because they may reopen the government because, yes, there are some Democrats who understand that people are going hungry. And what have they done? They have found out and they have exposed a White House that is working overtime to give tax cuts to billionaires. At the same time, they're working overtime to take SNAP assistance, to take food assistance from working Americans. And this has exposed just how much the Republican Party hates the idea of helping working Americans, helping middle-class Americans who are struggling with health care. So you take that, and you take the massive win that Democrats had this past week, massive, historic in some ways, where Steve Bannon said Democrats erased 10 years of Republican gains in one night. And why did that happen? Donald Trump said it happened because of the government shutdown. So all this fear and loathing and all this whining, I wish Democrats for once, just once, could take a win and then understand the Republicans, they were never going to help working Americans. They learned that through this process. So you know who else learned that through this process? The American voter. Donald Trump was exposed, and the administration was exposed, and Republicans were exposed as the party that fought like hell to give tax cuts to billionaires, to multinational corporations, to the richest of the rich. And we learned just last week they were trying to extend those tax cuts to even more billionaires, to give them even bigger tax cuts. At the same time, they were fighting like hell to stop working Americans from getting basic food assistance. And just a helping hand, just a little helping hand with our health care costs. So, yeah, the government shutdown is going to come to an end. But the reality of what this Republican Party stands for today, the reality of what Donald Trump was fighting for this past week, that will stay with voters for years to come.
Yeah, we will return to our top story, Drake May, a little later in the morning. But right now, in terms of the shutdown, it's interesting to see how this is being received. Because I think we have to look at it in two different ways. There's the sort of short-term impact and the long-term impact. And like last night, a lot of Democrats deeply unhappy by what happened last night. A sense, particularly from the progressive wing, but not entirely, that this is a weird moment to cave. The Democrats had momentum coming off of the election night win. Polls only getting worse for President Trump and the Republicans. They're squarely taking the blame here. There's some who really want to push Democrats to push the advantage, bargain harder, get a better deal. And it's true, they did not get a guarantee to preserve those Obamacare subsidies. There's going to be a vote later next month, it looks like, but not a guarantee that it'll happen. But there are some good things that did come of this deal, Joe. To your point, obviously, government workers are going to start getting paid again. SNAP benefits are going to be restored. There's going to be a moratorium on layoffs, the federal workforce, and the restoration of those who have lost their jobs. And I think for Democrats, short term, there's frustration, but long term, yes, they have used this shutdown to underscore the point you just made. Republicans are out of touch. Republicans don't care about the little guy. Republicans care about the wealthy and the tax cuts for the rich and building ballrooms and the like. We can go down the list. So I think that's where we are right now. There's a lot of sort of unhappiness in the party last night. Why did we blink now? Yeah. So many people said to me, I mean, my phone was blowing up last night with unhappy Democrats. But I think those who like the deal say, look, we need to take a step back. Yeah. We're playing more of a long game.
Listen. I understand. I understand people who are intense on the left, just like when I was in Congress, I understood people who were intense on the right about government shutdowns and keeping them going forever and ever and ever. I also understand, though, when you have people, let me go to John Bresnahan, because John was there with me during our government shutdowns back in the 1990s. John, you always have people like me. You always have the extremists in Congress raising their hands and going, the American voters will remember this forever. They will remember, they will see that we're... No, it's just not true. It's not true. We used, as you know, in 95 and 96, even though we lost those shutdowns in the short term, we used those shutdowns to define the Republican Party as the party of balanced budgets. We all took it. We all took it home. And, yeah, Bill Clinton won the 96 campaign, but But we won Congress 96, 98, 2000, 2002, 2000. I mean, we stayed in power for a decade, and every Republican went out there and said, we balanced budgets, and we did it 4 years in a row for the first time in a generation. Now that's the first time in 100 years. But we used that government shutdown to frame what we were the next decade. And I'm not asking you as a reporter to get involved in this. I'm asking you, though, just to report on how government shutdowns work. And when people are running around with their hair in fire on the left saying, oh, this is the end of the Democratic Party, they should look to last Tuesday and look to next year and understand that these government shutdowns, more than anything else, they define where the parties stand. And that stays in cement through the next election.
My work is easy because I use Fixer.
All right, Fixer. Sponsored. See, ads even on the videos there. So what did we notice between the two? Well, the first one kind of presented it more like a news program package. This is a Morning Joe, which is a morning talk show where they get experts and discuss. We heard the panelists there. We saw 9 panelists and only really got to hear 2 or 3 speak, but much more critical and harsh of the administration of the Republicans than what the previous one did, right? We also see that one of the elements of cable news is they're trying to fill as much time as possible because they have 24/7. They're on the channel all the time. So I felt like, I don't know about you, but it felt like they're talking, when's this going to end type of thing. And some people crave that content. They just want to listen to stuff like this. Personally, I listen to news and then I move on to different things that I want to listen to. But I think it's a good analysis to watch both MSNBC and Fox News to get the different perspectives. Now, let's hear what CNN had to say about the shutdown, and let's notice what's different between the two.
Is still real for millions of Americans. That's because full SNAP benefits and back pay for hundreds of thousands of federal workers still hasn't hit bank accounts. Flights are still being canceled. Healthcare costs are about to surge for millions of Obamacare enrollees if Congress doesn't act before January. CNN's Renee Marsh is with us now on this story. Let's start first with the food. You have 42 million SNAP recipients, and it's not like the House voted and they saw their money.
Right, and they may have to wait a few more days. And remember, we've been talking about SNAP for several weeks now because this program has really became the flashpoint of this shutdown and really illustrated the area in which Americans were feeling the pain. So the big question now is when will the Americans who rely on this program receive their full benefits? And it really depends on what state you live in. It is a patchwork and it will be different from state to state, but on average or generally speaking, anywhere from the next 3 days to a week, people can begin to receive these full funds. And the good news about this funding package that the president signed last night is that it also includes funding this particular program for a full year. So this program is secure for that amount of time.
And what about federal workers who, they're looking for their back pay? They haven't gotten paychecks.
Yeah, we're talking about more than 1.4 million federal workers who are either furloughed or working without pay. Many of them missed some 2 full paychecks during this shutdown. And when they will receive their back pay really, again, is going to rely on and depend on which agency that they work for. Many of these agencies have different pay schedules. In speaking with the labor unions in old times, they usually would get their back pay within 3 business days. There is some concern it could take longer this time around because of many of the staffers within these HR departments at these agencies have either been furloughed or left a job as part of the administration's larger downsizing of the federal workforce. But again, generally speaking, we are expecting people will start getting their back pay in the next few business days or several business days. We heard from DHS Secretary Kristi Noem saying that TSA will get their back pay in the, quote, coming days.
And these Obamacare subsidies, the extension of which Democrats were demanding, I think people have become very aware of them. What about them? Because they're set to expire at the end of the year.
Right. And that was really the sticking point, which is why this fight lasted as long as it did. Democrats really holding out for a vote on that. We know that because of this deal that was signed, it guarantees a vote in early December in the Senate. We talked about this before. It's unlikely to go anywhere, but this is something that will impact some 24 million Americans. And we're talking about subsidies going away and what that means for premiums. It could mean as much as 112% increase on these health insurance premiums. So along with groceries being more expensive, this is the other issue that Americans could be facing if something isn't resolved with extending these subsidies. Brianna.
Congress is back in session and back on the clock. The enhanced Obamacare subsidies at the center of the shutdown fight will expire at the end of the year, and with no extension, tens of millions of Americans could see their premiums jump an average of 114%. Republican leaders in the Senate have promised to vote on the subsidies before they expire, but it's not so clear in the House. Speaker Mike Johnson says that he's open to working with Democrats to address health insurance costs, but would not guarantee a vote on extending the enhanced subsidies. Republican Congressman Carlos Jimenez of Florida is with us now. Sir, you support a one-year extension on these subsidies. Are you expecting the Speaker to allow a vote on that?
I haven't spoken to the Speaker about it. I think it's still up in the air. There are a number of us on our side of the aisle that want to see the extension of these subsidies because I think it would hurt a great number of American citizens. But mind you, the termination of these subsidies was actually put in by the Democrats. They're the ones that put the subsidies in place, knowing that it was not sustainable. And they're the ones that actually put the end date. And so I find it very ironic that they are now saying that's our issue when in fact it was their issue. They created this. Now also, one thing you need to think about, the subsidies are there to try to make the Affordable Care Act affordable. So that means that the Affordable Care Act right now is unaffordable. It is running amok. It is full of problems, just like we said there was going to be full of problems when it was passed originally by the Democrats, and now we need to fix it. And so the Speaker is committed to fixing the health care issue, the Affordable Care Act, either by replacement or by fixing it so that it becomes affordable again. Right now it is unaffordable. I want the one-year extension to give us the time to fix the underlying problem, which is the Unaffordable Care Act, and that's what we're facing today.
Yeah, I mean, we're hearing these concerns, even people who aren't on the Obamacare exchange, but we're hearing that complaint from everyone. It's a huge problem that you all in Congress are addressing or need to address. I want to ask you on the Epstein files. Speaker Johnson is saying that he will bring a vote next week. Will you vote, if there is that vote, will you vote to force DOJ to release all the Epstein files?
I have no problem in releasing, the files that they have. I know that they've also run into the court system. The court system, some of the files they can't release because then it would put in jeopardy the names of a lot of the victims, and they want their privacy. And so whatever files can be released should be released. We need to put this behind us.
Let's pause there because we're kind of off topic from the government shutdown. We don't need to go into the Epstein files because the other ones didn't speak about this. Before I jump back on the full screen, I do want to note that how is this different? We saw it's a news presenter or an anchor would be the name of the person who leads the news program. Reporters are people who actually go into the field and do interviews, kind of like the woman who was standing up in these shots right here. What we notice is it's definitely visual. How do we make news visual? Let's add a bunch of graphics and standing. Let's add it to look good. These are talking heads would be what they're what is an example of the type of shot. And you can see they're in two different locations. Being interviewed. Now, what's super fascinating, and having worked in local news, sometimes our anchor would sit in the newsroom and the guest would be one room over. So it seems like they're somewhere else in the world, but they're just talking to them in a different room. It just gives more prestige than being on the news set, especially if they're going to have a contentious argument. Whereas you could see the representative here from Florida, Carlos Jimenez, kind of bristled when the Epstein files were brought up. But as far as the government shutdown, conservative was definitely putting a lot of blame on the liberal side of it. I feel like this clip represents that it was kind of more unbiased. They're getting perspective from both sides and weren't really saying like, hey, the administration's really bad, or it just doing kind of trying to be as much journalist integrity as possible, but still anything that needs to constantly entertain really is going to affect our journalistic integrity and affect biases in those instances. So definitely just a couple of good clips. Money is really the cause and why our new normal is this way. And President Trump has coined the term fake news. Fake news refers to the claim that the news source is just making up news. And it is a strong and powerful claim that you can just say fake news to anything you don't agree with. And just because the news is something you don't agree with doesn't mean it's true, or doesn't mean it's false. That's one of those things where it's like, in a land of fake news, we watch 3 different clips about something. We need to then be, as educated media consumers, parse out the information. So the way that I consume news, of course, is I think, just whatever your politics might be, it's always good to check in on the opposite side and how they are conveying the message, because then you can know that, hey, the thing that my side believes, they're going to also be pumping their agenda to you so that you continue to be on their side. It's good, I think, as a news media content consumer, to look at it from all sides and then make your own educated decision. And by educated, it is do research. If you want to watch the news and understand a specific topic, it's really good to not only read from your source, it's also good to read from someone who claims to be unbiased, but also like read the arguments against it and for it. And then you can try to consider, what is the agenda of the person who's arguing against it? What is the agenda of the person who's arguing for it? And that way, it's a lot more work. That's the hardest part. And that is one of the biggest issues with news coverage in America now, is people aren't willing to do the hard work. So they just watch their side's channel and then consume and then repeat the information that's being pumped out there. So we and that's what we end up seeing on social media, because also in social media, we're able to see people who might not be as informed, or might not be as might not put in as much work as we're doing to know the information, arguing with one another. Because on social media like Facebook or Instagram or TikTok or X, any of those, you can just say whatever you want with no proof. Now, AI and X as Gronk, and even AI can be corrupted and biased. So you can't even check you can't even believe the fact checks nowadays. And it's almost like Donald Trump coined the term fake news as a way to argue against the validity of a certain news channel's reporting. But but realistically, it's hard to not think that all news is fake unless you have multiple sources, and that's actually good reporting, is checking your source and making sure that there's other sources that can validate that information. So what can we do? I think that we can just work hard to know what news coverage we want, and know that, like, also, if you're just consuming from one area, you might it might be biases. If you're just getting your news from TikTok, how valid is that? Whose TikTok is it? If you're getting news from a podcast, what is that podcaster's agenda? Someone like Joe Rogan, who's the most famous and largest audience, just kind of watches and parses the news as it comes and goes, but definitely has more of a conservative slant in his own personal politics. So he's geared to believe conservative talking points more than progressive talking points. And you can look up on YouTube Joe Rogan being wrong clips, and fortunately he has some people on his show that fact checked him with he'll say this is true, and then people on the show will be like, well, here's an article that says it's not true, but then he'll still say, well, I'm right because it's my opinion, and people then take those opinions and treat them as facts, even though he's just a comedian with a podcast who's expressing his own opinions and not facts, but he will present his opinions as facts. So those are who we get our information from, is always going to be critical and important. Okay, that's what I have to say and share with you this week. Please feel free to read my notes, which I have posted, my lecture notes, as well as for our discussion. I want to know, how do you get news? Do you trust news? What is your feeling about your news source? Now, I really don't want us to jump into the politics, but I really want to know how you consume. Do you watch news? And if so, I'm interested in how you do it. Is there any way that you think we can fix our news problem? What is the best way, or what do you think? Because I even think that, like, personally, even with social media, I like to I'll have someone show me, hey, did you see this? And I'll be like, yeah, but that's just their opinion. So how you consume news, let me know how you consume news. What do you think we can do? And who do you trust, and why do you trust in the news source that you read, or that you consume, or that you view? Okay. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you again. Oh, before I stop recording, just a reminder, I did put an announcement, but we are doing an optional Zoom next week. And we're going to discuss the final project. So next week, Tuesday, the 25th at 5 p.m., I will be hosting a Zoom. Please come and join me. We'll talk about the final project. We'll review for the final, and we will I'll answer any questions. You get extra credit if you show up and talk with me, but if you don't, please feel free to watch and view. There'll be valuable information. Also, if you haven't seen it yet already, Saturday, the 22nd at 6 p.m., the film program is having its fall film showcase. And if you attend, check out the announcements. You'll be able to earn extra credit for the class, and you can even get additional extra credit if you bring people to it. So we're really proud of our film department and all of our film programs. And what's exciting is we even have people who turned in their PSAs in this class that will be airing in the we'll be seeing one of our classmates program short film or short PSA in the fall showcase. So I'm hope you can attend and support our classmate. And so until next time, I'll talk to you.